So again, for those of you that don't know Mass Senior Action, welcome. As you can see by the number of blue shirts here, Mass Senior Action is a powerful organization led and driven by seniors throughout Massachusetts. And here today you see that we have a strong presence here in Boston. For those of you that are not members, as you can see, our events are open to all. And I will say your membership and your participation in Mass Senior Action makes us stronger. Right now we have 309 members in Boston. I think if those of you who aren't members yet join, I think we're going to be at least at 350, if not more. So I'm going to tell you very briefly about Mass Senior Action and what I am doing and what we do before we focus on the issue that we're here to talk about today. Mass Senior Action was founded in 1981 by a group of seniors who found that once they hit retirement, there were a lot of needs that were not getting met. And they knew that as one person, it was going to be easy to dismiss them. But when we join together, when we build our collective power and our collective voice, like you see here today, that's when we can get things done. For more than 43 years, seniors just like yourselves have been making change at the local, state, and even federal level. So I'm going to talk with you, I can tell you lots about accomplishments, but I'm going to focus on one because over the last 10 years, seniors through Mass Senior Action have been fighting to lower the cost of Medicare for seniors who are living on the edge. How many of you were shocked when you retired and went to sign up for Medicare? How much money? Nobody? No? Okay. So there was, 10 years when we started this, there were almost no programs to help with the cost of Medicare. Because seniors just like yourself fought, testified at hearings, attended rallies, went to the State House time and time again, now more than 40,000 seniors have been able to enroll in a program called the Medicare Savings Program that can help with your out-of-pocket costs of Medicare. We have information in the back before you leave, but I'm going to tell you, if you are a senior and your monthly income is below $2,844 a month, there is a program that will help to pay your Medicare costs. So if you don't know about it, or you know somebody else who's struggling with the high cost of prescriptions, or could use a little relief, particularly as we face property taxes, please find out about the Medicare Savings Program. You can call Mass Senior Action. We have certified application counselors that can take your application over the phone and help save you money. Some of our members are getting the bare minimum, but the bare minimum is still saving $200 a month. Other of our members who have signed up are saving more than $800 a month between prescriptions and premium assistance. That could not have happened if it had not been people who stepped up and took charge. At Mass Senior Action, we have a saying: we don't take it,
we take charge.
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 And just as we took charge to lower the cost of Medicare for tens of thousands of seniors across the Commonwealth, we are here today to take charge to fight back this huge increase on property taxes. Because we don't take it, we don't take it. So, shortly, the mayor has arrived, and so before you in, I want to tell you something, that many of our members last month were at a meeting at our usual location at Charles Street AME Church. We had the city assessor come and talk with us about this issue and help us understand. To be clear, and we're going to hear more about this from Mayor Wu, but I want to make sure that we kind of help frame it as Mass Senior Action has been looking at it. The city has very limited options about how to make money. And a lot of those restrictions come from the state. And so in order to make changes to things like taxes, we often need permission from the state to make those changes, even though it's something affecting Boston residents and our communities. So we all know that COVID has impacted our lives in every way possible, including that a lot of the offices downtown are vacant because folks are working from home. Those vacancies have led to the property values going down. What happens when property values go down? The taxes go down. The rate of the taxes is the same, but the amount of money that they get is less. So because the city has limited options about how to raise money, that leaves them, they're already charging commercial properties the maximum allowed by state law. So we're already at that limit. And so there's not a lot of options. And so we're facing tough choices. And at Mass Senior Action, we're saying we're not accepting cuts. We're not accepting cuts to our schools. We're not accepting cuts to senior services. We're not accepting cuts to the important things that help make our community strong. And so the city needs to raise that money to keep everything operating. And that is what is pushing up the residential property taxes. Commercial is already at the limit, but residential is kind of at the minimum. Mayor Wu saw this coming and has been working to make sure that we could bring in new money multiple ways, but also has asked the state for special permission for a short period of time to raise the commercial rate. The reason for that, again, their values went down, so their tax bills went down. If we raise the rate, that means they're not going to pay more. It means it's going to kind of stay stable. But that will allow us to keep down the homeowners' taxes and residential taxes. So we're here to work with Mayor Wu to kind of figure out how do we tackle this challenge. A number of members got together and prepared some questions, but she's going to provide us some background, and then we're going to make a plan. After Mayor Wu has, she's going to be with us, answer questions, and then we're going to come together because we have more than 250 people. We want to use that strength to make this see through. So without further, I would like to welcome our mayor, Mayor Michelle Wu.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. What a delight, as always, to be with you all. I was expecting a couple tables, but I didn't know. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our Boston chapter members. Thank you to all the Mass Senior Action team. Thank you to all those. And you already went up to the steakhouse. Can you wave a hand so we can give a special shout out? It makes such a big difference, and I'm so grateful for the advocacy that you are once again standing up for all the families that are going to be impacted. So I figured we have two options. So I have this presentation that has some slides, okay. Or I could just kind of talk through it more quickly and then answer questions. So it depends on if you want to see the graphs and the charts about tax rates and corporations and this and that, or would you rather just talk? Okay, I was gonna take a vote. So, okay, is that, well, let's do a quick vote. Who wants to see all the details? Okay, some people do, and then who wants to just go straight into talking it through? Okay, how about this? We will make the slides available through Carolyn and the team after, so we'll send them out to everyone afterwards. That way you can see the details, and hopefully with just the conversation that we could, if you have any questions on it that we didn't cover, please reach out to me. So I want to just say a couple things about this. First of all, why do taxes matter, right? And maybe this is what everyone already knows, but everything that we do at the city level, we pay for because of you all. We pay for from property taxes, from parking tickets, from all of that. And the way that the city budget is running, and should I stand over here for the Zoom? Is that better? Okay. Hello to everyone on Zoom as well. The way that all of that happens, in Massachusetts, cities are very, very restricted in how we can collect taxes. It's very strict. By state law, we don't have a lot that we can change about it. There's a couple things you should know about it. One is that all cities have to have a balanced budget. Just like you all in your households, we can't spend what we don't have. And so we have to count what revenues we have from taxes first before we set our budget of how we're going to pay for the things that we need to pay for. What do we pay for? Every teacher, every firefighter, EMT, police officer, public works official, programming, community centers, all of our city services, the majority of our budget goes to salaries, healthcare for our workers. We don't do basically any line items to organizations or other things that are, I wish we had the funding to do that, but unlike the state budget, where you go up there and you advocate for each organization to get its own chunk of funding, we never had the capacity to do that. And so when we have to make a cut, like what people are saying, don't do this tax proposal, just cut your budget instead, we would have to cut over 2,200 city jobs from the budget in order to make the same thing work. So it's a different reality that we have, and that's where I want to start. 2 bits of history related to how budget laws were set. In 1978, some of you all might remember this, or maybe you were even part of it, there was a constitutional amendment in Massachusetts to create tax classification. And that meant that you could charge a tax rate differently for a commercial building than for a residential building. It had to go through the whole process of a ballot initiative and this and that, and it was a hard fight. But the reason why they did this was because advocates believed that buildings are used differently. Commercial buildings are used to make money for the businesses and the shareholders and people that are using them. Residential buildings are used to go to sleep at night. It's a very different purpose, and that's why we charge a higher tax rate for commercial buildings since 1978. In 1980, after that split happened, the business community and some of the others started to say, actually, we don't want to be charged that much more, so there need to be limits. So then they pushed and pushed and pushed, and the legislature passed Prop 2.5. Prop 2.5 puts a tight belt around cities. It means that the biggest source of new revenues that we get, property taxes, can only go up 2.5% per year. And we have to have a balanced budget, and we can't create new taxes, unlike some other cities where you could do a soda tax, you could do income tax, this and that. We can't do anything at the city level without the state legislature. And we have tried, along with you all, to get a transfer fee that would have increased the senior tax exemption, that would have provided funding for affordable housing, but the state has said no, and others have said no. And so they say, keep your same taxes, it can only go up 2.5% every year. The problem is that as you all feel at home, inflation, the cost of groceries, the cost of healthcare, everything goes up faster than 2.5%. So unless we take that 2.5% and try to find a way to do more than that, we are just trying to tread water and stay in the same place. To keep the same number of city workers, to keep the same level of staffing and services, we have to have at least 2.5% increase as we're required by law, and then try to find new development or ways that we can fund even more. So when people are saying cut your budget, or use reserves, or don't take 2.5%, sometimes they're not understanding the realities that we're already limited very, very much at the local level, unlike at the state level or other cities and towns. So We pay for city services through the split between residents and commercial properties. In 1982, after Prop 2.5, it was a 70-30 split. Commercial properties paid 70% of the taxes, residents paid 30%. By the time I started on the city council, a little over 10 years ago, it was more like 2/3, 1/3, about 65%, 35% commercial and residential. This year, it's already down to 60-40. Commercial properties are paying 60%, residents paying 40%, because we've had a lot more residential buildings, we've had a lot more development in whole new parts of the city, like residents in the seaport and other places, so they've been making up more and more of the share. Because downtowns are changing everywhere, and we're seeing some of the businesses, not everybody's going in person, they're using Zoom, businesses aren't taking up as much space in those big office buildings anymore, we are trying to do things like convert that to housing, to bring more activation, to get those buildings filled back up. But in the meantime, every city is seeing that they're having their commercial sector pay even less now. So the question for all of us in Boston is, do we go from that 60-40 split to more like a 55-45 split in 1 year, when it would be a sudden shock for residents, or do we take the time to do it smoothly, do it right, so that everybody has a way to support themselves through a larger economic transition while we're trying to fix the bigger problem downtown anyway? And what the businesses are asking for is they know that if nothing happens, their taxes are going to go down a lot. And they know that if this does happen, their taxes still go down, just by a little, somewhat, not a lot. And because their taxes would go down somewhat and not a lot, that means that residents' taxes would not go up by that 28% spike that we are anticipating. So the first estimate was 33%. We've gotten more numbers, and now we are feeling fairly confident that the direction that we're headed is that we need this tool, and it's 28%, so it's not as bad as we thought, but 28% versus 33% isn't that much better, to be honest. So we cannot absorb that. Housing costs are already out of control. People are struggling to put food on the table, and this affects every single resident, whether you own your home and your name is on the taxes, or whether you're a renter and you are still responsible for the costs that your landlord is going to have. This will affect you. So the other thing I want to mention is that sometimes the businesses will say, we're struggling, we can't afford this. Again, their taxes are still going down, and usually they plan based on what they paid last year. But the second thing is, their tax rates are now at almost an all-time low. We are at nearly half the tax rate for businesses as it was in 1995. So 20 years ago, their tax rates were here, they're now here. Even 10 years ago, their tax rate was much higher than it is now. We've seen a steady decline in how much the businesses are contributing to overall share and in their individual rates. Okay, let me see what other points I want to make. Okay, the one other thing I will say, and this is just to, some of you who've already been in the State House have probably heard this already, they said, well, the city of Boston's overspending, right? Our budget went up by 8% this year, that's not responsible, they should just cut that instead. So I want to really explain where we are putting our money. Of that 8% that people are talking about, it's really only 7%. 1% is from, we got rid of the BPDA or the BRA, changed to a city planning department, so we have full control and coordination of that. But that came with its own money and its own costs, so that was just about a separate change. So 7% that the city budget went up. It was because we set up new contracts for our police officers, firefighters, and EMTs, and some of our largest city unions. We need to pay people in this day and age to be able to attract and recruit and retain talent. And if you look at our surrounding cities, Cambridge's budget went up by 8%, Brookline's budget went up by 6%, the MBTA, which had to totally do an overhaul, and they're getting good work done, although they need to do more too, their budget went up by 11%. That's just how the economy is moving these days, so we are well within what we are compared to among other cities. So the long and short of it is, Boston has been really focused on being financially responsible. We know this tool works because Mayor Menino put it into effect 20 years ago, and we talked to the same people on his team then who said this is the time to use it. It went well. There were no harmful consequences for businesses or for residents. And people keep telling me things are different now. You know what's different? There's a woman in the mayor's office now. That's what I hear. But what's also different is that we are so grateful to partner with all of you. We know that this is a hard fight and that there's a lot of confusing information out there. So I want to make sure you have everything you need to be our strongest champions and to help get even more residents involved in this. It passed the City Council in June. It passed the House of Representatives in July. And we are waiting, we're just kind of stuck on the Senate, waiting for that last step before it would get signed off. And so we have a little window left. Tax bills need to be finalized by end of November, early December, in order for the state to check them, and then for them to get mailed out in January. So we are going to work as hard as we can work. My goal is to, again, make sure residents have all the information. So we want to start doing some more in-person town halls or information sessions, and we'd love to get your help in different neighborhoods, inviting people to those and making sure that they can get the information and have full understanding too. But thank you for everything that you're doing. It makes a huge difference, and there are no voices that are more powerful than those who have already been shaping and building our communities over these incredible years that we've been through. And so when you take the time to show up, to speak out, it echoes far and wide. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, Carolyn's coming back up.
So thank you, Mayor, and I know we hope to open them up, but there was a group that gathered to already kind of prepare some questions that we hoped helped to reflect on some of the others. So I know you touched on this, but I think, one of the things that we're hearing a lot in the media and folks still kind of would love to hear more is, how come city residents and homeowners we're not notified sooner and, are kind of up against, the final hour?
That's a great question, and it's one that, in fact, we were working our hardest to be able to get in front of. So every year, the tax process takes almost a full year. Bills go out for the new year in January, and then they get issued quarterly after that. But throughout the year, and especially in the fall, is when each and every building gets looked at by our assessor's department to say, did the value go up? Did the value go down? How do we change all of this? And then it has to be checked 5, 6, 10 times. So we knew that as every year, we wouldn't have the finalized values until the end of October. And so that's why we went up to the State House early this time and said, we're not sure exactly what the numbers will be. We think this is going to be a challenge. And we've been talking about this for a year and a half now in different ways, and first filed this back in April when we were sure that this was going to be an issue. And now, as soon as we have the latest information, about 28%, we've also put that out publicly. Now, what happened 20 years ago was they did it because the State House's session usually ends at the end of July, but then tax bills don't get finalized until November. And so if you wait until November to even start talking about it when you have all the information, then you already missed the time where the State House could have done something about it. So we actually started months ago in April, had the conversation, had lots of hearings and this and that, and got votes from 2 out of the 3 places that we needed to get votes from. And we're still hoping that every day in this window can count and can matter. What happened 20 years ago was they saw that there was going to be a problem in that November. Then they went to the State House in January and said, we need this change now. And they actually mailed 2 bills to each homeowner. One bill said, this is what your tax will be if the legislation doesn't pass. And one bill said, this is the tax will be if the legislation does pass. And then everybody called the state legislature. We were trying not to create that kind of crunch, in January. This is also a different year because we're coming up on an odd year instead of coming up on an even year when they did it 20 years ago. So the legislature is in 2-year cycles, and we kind of missed that carryover period where it could have been acted on in January.
Thank you. So another question, and we've heard this quite a bit from many folks within the community. Universities, hospitals, other nonprofit entities that are not paying taxes. One, folks want to say, what are they actually doing for our communities? And, two, does the city have the power to tax them or to get more revenue from those entities?
Yeah, so the majority of the land in Boston actually is not taxable because it either belongs to city or state government or universities, hospitals, or others that are nonprofits that sometimes are still even making money, but are not, and using cities and services, but that are not by law able to be taxed. So we don't have the legal authority to require a tax from them. Our pilot program basically makes it very clear that we expect them to contribute their fair share. And we're in the process now of renegotiating many of the what are called IMPs, institutional master plans, where every 10 years a college or a hospital has to come back to the city and say, this is my plan for the next decade in terms of what I'm going to develop, the building, I need new dorms, or I need this or that or the other, and we have to sign off on that. We've been connecting those sign-off conversations with pilot. So we've been working on a new resolution that hopefully over the next couple of months we'll be able to have a program that works a lot better and can bring in more revenue. As a sense of scale, the pilot program brings in a couple tens of millions of dollars. The shift that we're talking about here is about $265 million that we are looking for businesses to help smooth over for residents. Again, still by getting a cut, but just not as big of a cut. And that's the equivalent of, let me just get the exact number, 22,231 city jobs, for example. Almost the entirety of our fire department, we could cut all of that, and that would be the equivalent. So it's a big, big chunk that even if we were able to double, triple, sort of, multiply by 10 on the pilot, it wouldn't get us all the way there.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of talk and confusion and in terms of kind of the impact on the business community, and particularly small businesses. When we talk about kind of shifting the taxes as you've been talking about, can you tell us a little bit more about who we're talking about? Who are the owners of these companies? A lot of our members kind of pointed out on a lot of these, kind of financial institutions and other investors that have been making money off of our communities for generations.
Yeah, so most small businesses are in, they're one of the tenants in a building, and they have a lease signed with that commercial landlord. The lease most often is what's called a triple net lease, which means whatever I get as a bill as a landlord, I'm passing straight on to you as a business to pay. So the landlords actually aren't even necessarily the ones that are going to be managing all of this in certain situations. And so these small businesses, they make their budget for the year based on what their taxes were the year before. In the buildings that are struggling, where they're seeing more vacancies, usually that comes with rent coming down as well. And so those businesses will not only feel rent coming down when their landlord is experiencing the vacancies, but they will have their taxes go down as well. Again, it won't be as big of a tax break as they otherwise would have gotten, but it is still less than what they paid the year before, and it makes a whole big difference on the residential side. Our goal, number one goal for taxes is stability. We want everyone to be able to plan their lives out. Our residents and neighbors, and also the entrepreneurs and businesses. And that's based on keeping things as close to the year before as possible. And that's all we're asking for. Oh, and I will say one thing on this point. Part of the compromise that we already agreed to on the House side, in order to get approval, was we took the window, we were going to have a 5-year window to step down and phase out this shift. We agreed to do that over 3 years instead, because the business community said they wanted it shorter. We also agreed that we would set aside city funds so that any small business that somehow did see an increase or somehow had some circumstance happen because of this, that we would be able to provide them direct support through some grants that in a program that we would set up. So we've been thinking especially about small businesses and trying to find ways to target that to them directly rather than to the larger corporate landlords that frankly can absorb some of this.
Thank you. These last 2 weeks when, more than 60 of our members each week were up at the Senate talking with senators, one of the things that many of the Senate offices did was to tell people that there are tax relief programs, including the senior circuit breaker tax credit, that is a mouthful. Also asking about the elder exemption. I know that that's something that Mass Senior Action has worked on with you, but can you tell us how those programs can help, and are we up against any limits there?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I want to give a quick shout out because this question relates to two people who I see are in the room now. We had our transfer fee home rule petition sent up to the State House with your support, with your partnership, and quarterbacked by Representative Brandon Fluker Oakley, who's in the House over here. And that had a specific provision that would have not only generated $100 million a year dedicated to affordable housing, but also made sure that 25% of that went directly to keeping seniors in their homes, and also increasing the exemption so that we would double the number of seniors who could qualify for those exemptions. We know that the limits are too low right now. We've tried and tried and tried in the State House. It got into the governor's package. It moved in a lot of places, but it didn't get through. And so it's hard to hear sometimes that people say, why didn't you do this instead? When we tried and you didn't let us do that either. And now we're kind of stuck. But I want to give a shout out because as soon as Ms. Critchlow went up to the State House, I got calls about it too. Like, you're sending the big guns up at us or pointed at us now. So thank you for mobilizing.
Sorry, we've been asked to put you on screen.
So a lot of folks here have a long history, certainly longer than you and I have here in this city. Remember when they were pushed out of the West End, remember when they were pushed out of the South End. It feels like this is just a setup to push people out of the city completely. Isn't this just more of that in a different way?
I say every day we need to make Boston a home for everyone. And at the foundation of that is housing has to be the most important issue that we are tackling. We're getting kids who have to be moved out of school halfway through the year because their families can't afford to pay rent. Seniors who have lived their entire lives in a neighborhood now having to figure out how to even hold on, much less be close to their communities and their friends and their networks. So, it pains me so much because this is so clearly common sense. Some people are saying, well, you're prioritizing residents over corporations, and but I would argue that all of our businesses depend on our residents being rooted firmly in our communities. It is better for our businesses when their employees, when their customers, when the people who welcome them and their neighbors are thriving in their lives. And so that's why we're getting a little bit of sort of hearing from both sides out of them of, no, we don't want residents' taxes to go up. We don't want our taxes to be, we want the massive tax break ourselves. There must be other ways to do this. Believe me, this is the most painful way to get something passed, having to go through every level of the State House and this and that. If there were other ways to do this and to tackle this challenge, we would. This is what worked in 2004. We know that it went smoothly then. There were no issues. There were some of the same concerns beforehand, but it passed smoothly and it was implemented and really saved a lot of residents in their homes then. And we need to see that same energy and that same urgency today.
So, again, many of the senators that we spoke to kind of said, well, the city kind of came up with this, and this was the one idea they had, and this was, put it all on us and are blaming us for the city's problem. Can you just talk with us a little bit more about, kind of other alternatives. I know you touched on this, but just again, we want to make sure we are arming people so when you call your senators, when you speak to your senators and they tell you that, you can say, nope, that's not the case.
So the alternatives that, we should, first of all, be really clear what the problem is. The problem is that state tax law is very rigid, and when residential and commercial values all go in the same direction, when the economy is strong and property values go up, everything stays in balance. Even if the economy is challenged and property values take a dip on the residential side and the commercial side together, things still stay in relative balance and can have a little bit more stability. But when one goes up and one goes down, that's when it gets out of whack. And so when commercial goes down and residential is still strong and going up, things get squeezed over very fast. All we are asking for is to smooth that out so that residents have the ability to manage and plan out and make all of the pieces in their lives work. And businesses, again, commercial properties are for a different purpose than residential properties. They're there to generate profits, and they're there to sometimes take risks on what happens in the economy. And this is a risk that we can't bear on the residential side. So what else did we look at? If we took less than the 2.5%, that would not only keep us under what we need to be in terms of inflation for salaries, healthcare costs for our workers and retirees and all of that for this year, it would carry over for every year after that. If we took, they said, take your reserves, you have some money saved up, use that now and give it to all the residents instead of taking away the massive corporate tax breaks. In some ways, I wish we had the flexibility to issue tax breaks whenever we felt like it. It is illegal according to the state constitution and state law for us to just send out rebates only to some and not others and to do it in certain ways. And so that actually isn't something that we could explore at all. And I just want to say a word on reserves. Right, if you have a savings account, if you've managed to save up some little nest egg, that should be used for emergencies. We are in a time where unemployment is lower at the city than at the state or the country, where all of the job numbers, the foot traffic, the business indicators, new businesses getting licenses, things are all moving in the right direction. We are not in a time of economic crisis. There are some that feel in the business community that they are having a hard time because of this particular transition and the risks that they took, the property values they paid when the market was at its highest and now the market is in a different place. But the question is, whose responsibility is it to absorb that business risk that was taken? They seem to be saying they want each and every resident of the city of Boston to absorb that risk for them. When instead, again, their taxes will still go down, and we are using every bit of resources that we have in our reserves, in our budget, to solve their long-term problem as well, to work with them and try to get new businesses to open up and fill up those vacant spaces, to try to make sure their customers have everything they need. We've been giving out grants through our Economic Opportunity and Inclusion Cabinet, space grants that have helped new neighborhood businesses open up in different places. We're going to put those 225 liquor licenses to good use with good restaurants that will create new activity in our neighborhoods and create spaces for people to get together and have fun. All of this we're doing to support our residents and help our businesses. And some of the alternatives that they're mentioning just aren't real alternatives. They're either not legally possible, they require a lot of time to try to go through this process to ask for a new source of revenue, when we have something that is very common sense and proven because it's been done before and it works very well then.
Thank you. So much of the discussion was also in terms of recognizing the number of new buildings that have been going up in recent years and development. And if one question was, does the city have a plan around kind of that development if those office buildings that exist now are vacant, yet we still feel like we're seeing them go up, what's happening there? And then also, kind of building on that, if the new mode of business is for people to work from their homes, what is the plan to raise the values of commercial properties? Because this strategy just gives us a temporary, kind of 3 years, from what we've agreed with the House, right? And so what gets us beyond the next 3 years if this is the new mode of business?
That's a great question. So we've been spending a lot of time talking to those who own large office buildings in downtown Boston to say, what are you actually experiencing? And one of the largest owners of those buildings, they actually count by the number of cards that get tapped in when you go through you get to the elevators, you have to scan your employee ID. So they know exactly how many employees are coming in on which days of the week. And what they've seen is that compared to before the pandemic and through the pandemic, during the pandemic, the taps got down to almost nothing. And during the week, it was about 20% or 30% of the people who had been coming in before still tapping back in around 2021, 2022. At this point, they're back to high 90%, so I think it was something like 96%, 95% of the number of people who were tapping in before the pandemic are still tapping in on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday, it was something like 65%, and then Friday was like 30%. So I think we're starting to see some patterns where it's not that all companies are abandoning their offices, they're changing some of their styles, and sometimes it's just 1 or 2 days a week where it's lighter, and companies are having to make decisions about whether they still keep their full offices or shrink that space. But a lot of the businesses, or a lot of the industries that hold up Boston actually aren't things that you can do remotely anyway. You can't do healthcare. Your doctor can't always, to do surgery or to do research in the lab, you can't zoom in and do that. Life sciences, healthcare, lab, a lot of the industries that we're focused on, even green jobs of installing solar panels and changing the infrastructure so that we can absorb flooding, that's all in-person work, and we are putting a lot of investments to make sure that people can have those kinds of jobs that are going to be good jobs that will keep growing in the next couple generations. The spaces that are empty, we need to find a way to support them, and the city's created a program where they can access resources and incentives to convert an office building that's empty into apartments or homes. We now have more than 500 housing units that are going to be created just through those offices converting. We keep adding new buildings to that every single day, and the hope is that we will grow that number. And then we have to have a different strategy. We have to really look at how can we get more companies in Boston who want to be here because it's the safest major city in America, because there's great amenities for raising a kid, for cheering on a championship sports team, for being in community, and having resources for every generation to thrive. Companies like Lego that have said, we are moving hundreds of employees to Boston from Connecticut. They said, we're moving to Boston because it is safe. We agree that you are making the investments to be safe from climate change. We see your focus on families of every generation, and that's where we want to be. That's where our employees want to live, so our company is going to move as well. Ultimately, it still comes down to where people can thrive, and the businesses are following that.
Thank you. Got another one. Here we are, time is of the essence. Sorry, I'm going to offer you a chair because I don't. Hi, Dr. Surgeon. I remember when I was pregnant with my children.
The doctor said I have to either sit down at events or wear compression socks, and it didn't work with this outfit. So.
You gotta take care of yourself. It could be a new style. Thank you. So here we are now. It's October 10th, I think, all day long. I think what we've heard is that folks are going to do their all to ensure that the Senate hears from us, that they feel our pressure and our push. But what happens if we can't get through the Senate? We're facing, and to be clear, I know I'm just talking with a number of you, all of you have quarter 2 tax bills right now, right? And what we are talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, a 28% increase from the bill you have now on January 1. So you all know what your bill looks like now. They are talking about a 28% increase beginning January 1. So here we are, you know, we'll do everything, and what happens if we can't?
Yeah. So first I'll say that I also am continuing to talk to colleagues in the Senate and those that the Senate invited to be at the table every day. I had a meeting with the Senate President that leadership and the Boston delegation were at. They asked me to go and sit alongside 4 of the representatives of the corporate interests who have been most opposed to this proposal and said, try to work it out. I have been trying. I have proposed additional compromises. I have shared more information. Ultimately, there is a difference in opinion where they believe that it's their right to take the biggest tax break that they can access, rather than recognizing in some ways the interconnections between how residents' health, financial health, and well-being is connected very much to their own. So we're still trying to work through that, and I'm still trying as much as I can to find a way where we can even reach out and find common ground with the biggest critics of the proposal who are focused only on commercial interests and corporations. We are working on that. If for some reason the Senate wants to, if the Senate is going to hold out and hope for the business interests to sign off on this, which I'm going to keep trying, but they have very different interests than elected officials who have to think about everyone and not just one particular smaller group. There is not too much that we can do on the city level. This is why we started this push so many months ago. This is why they took it on 20 years ago as well. We already take the maximum residential exemption. We already try to get every dollar we can for tax relief out the door to our residents. And all we are asking for here is for commercial entities to take a smaller tax break than they otherwise would, so that residents can have the stability that they deserve, and that helps all of us, including our businesses.
Thank you. And if or when, because you know it's a when it's passed in your action, we get this through the Senate, do we know where the governor stands on this and whether we can expect her to sign the bill?
I have been looking to have a more direct, I've briefed her at different points over the last 6-8 months. So I have been working through a couple different channels to have a more direct conversation with her. I know there are those on her team that are very updated on this, but I haven't been able to talk with her directly on this just yet.
Thank you. I know we probably have 5, maybe 10 more minutes with you. I'm not sure how quick your team is going to swoop you out. But I do want to see if folks have a few questions, and we probably can only take a couple. Okay, I'll come back up. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi. BostonGlobe.com this morning. I don't know if you saw this article. Average single-family home in Boston likely to see 14% spike in property taxes, the officials say, and there's your picture on there. So I just wondered what you think about that article. It makes it harder for me to go to my neighborhood association and say 28% now, and they say, oh, we saw this in the Globe. So.
Oh, okay, that's a really great question. So if you go into the rest of the article, they do explain why it's 28% from bill to bill. The way that our quarterly tax bills are organized, it's bunched up so that the first half of the year is based on the first half of the fiscal year is based on the last half of the calendar year's projections. So when those get adjusted at the end of the calendar year, it gets doubled up for the next bill. So the 28% would be the bill that is sent out in January. Averaged out over the entire year, including the bill that you already have, the Q2 bill, averaged out over the whole year, that is a 14% increase, but what you will still feel is the number that you get in January, which will be 28% higher than the bill that you have now.
Thank you. So to be clear, you know, and it is confusing when we see all these different numbers and they're like, no, it's not. And all of us have experienced when they try to scare us, and then when it's bad but not as bad, we're supposed to be thankful. This is not that situation, to be clear. The tax bills, if nothing is done at the state level, the tax bills from your quarter 2 to your quarter 3 will go up on average 28%. That may not mean each individual bill is going to go up 28%, but most of you, and I've been talking with you, I know that the development is all around your neighborhoods, it's pushing your values up, it's just, it feels right. So again, you know, you have the information. Don't let them trick us, because we know.
My question is, as you know, most senior citizens are on a fixed income. And if this bill is going to go in the month of February, that's the biggest gas bill, heating bill that we get. How are we supposed to be able to pay this big heating bill and the new increase on the tax bill?
This is exactly the type of information that our senators and our legislators need to hear. I think people sometimes who aren't living the reality who think, oh, 14% over the year is something that anyone can absorb, right? What, it's another couple coffees a year, whatever. It's, people need to hear the real stories of what this means. And right now, some of the people who are representing only businesses, and that's how they feed their families, and we need them in our democracy, and we welcome every voice, but theirs are the loudest voices right now, and so that's why each and every one of your voices, it has a huge impact. And so I'm going to take that every time I talk about it from now forward, and remember that and share that as well. And I know when our other elected leaders hear that, it will have an impact way deeper than some of what they're reading in the newspapers. Thank you.
So the mayor said that is exactly what your senators need to hear. I want to make sure everybody sees on their table, it says don't tax us out of our home, pass Boston's Home Rule House Bill 4942. On the back side is information for all 6 members of the Boston delegation. So one of them is your senator, and I would say all of them need to hear from us as Boston residents, because as the Boston delegation, they need to know that they need to stand with homeowners, with those of us, those of you who have built and invested in this city for decades, for generations, not with the corporate interests.
And I will add also, many of you have networks that are far-ranging. You have family who live in other cities and other parts of the state. Talk to them as well, because the funny thing about this whole system is that even though this is an issue that only affects Boston, every senator in the state will get to vote on it. And so we need our senators to be strong and lead the charge for us. But we also, if you have ties to other senators, it will also help for everyone to hear from us too.
You know, I hear us talking about the senators. They're acting as if they don't have parents. Their parents went before them. Me at 78, if I'm having a hard time, their parents may be older than I am. Are they supporting them so they won't have a hard time? They should ask them how are they going to do it, because truly they are taxing us out. When you're on a fixed income, the income is fixed. Social Security gave a 2% raise, and yet you want to raise my tax 28%? Well, when I do this adding and subtraction, I don't need geometry operating on the tree. All I need to do is add 1 and 1 is 2. You take 2 from 28, that's still 26%. And I'm as tired of fighting the fight lying up apart for me to stand here today. And somebody better listen, because karma, I hate to tell you what it really is.
Amen.
You know, and again, you know, when we think about the reality of seniors with fixed income. You get your little 2%, and then what else goes up? Medicare, right? And so Medicare bills go up on January 1. Many of you will be in the deductible period. So again, January and February, heating bills, higher cost of prescriptions and other things. So again, your senators need to understand the reality that you are facing. We need to hold them accountable.
Mayor Wu, my question to you is that majority of the people who work in the city of Boston live outside of Boston. Why can't they be penalized to help with this tax break?
We are actually going to do some outreach too to our workforce in general to make sure that everyone, no matter where they live, if they're connected to the city of Boston, they understand that this will impact them too. So actually, you're right that I was wrong in saying that this impact is going to be on Boston residents. This impact will also be on people who don't live in Boston, but who depend on Boston as well. And so for our city workers, that number that they're telling us to cut, fine $265 million, cut 2,231 jobs, those could very well be the workers that we're talking about, and we will make sure that they have all the information too.
Hi there, well, this is a little off topic, but not only is the grocery bills up, but car insurance went up like $600. I mean, this is ridiculous. We ever got to live with rats running around the neighborhood?
Yes, rats are real bad.
Well, one of the things that I heard, from many of our members is, as those assessments go up, as your property values go up, so do your home insurance. So a number of folks that I talked with said, well, I raised my deductible. Somebody said, well, I went up to 1,000. Another said, well, I went up to 2,500. Again, just trying to, maintain the bare minimum, let alone maintaining our old housing stock, right? And the repairs of people that need new roofs and things of that sort. So it's kind of, coming at us from every direction. Again, it is important for us to know the city does not have the power that it needs to fix this on its own. We need state permission, and the only way we can get that is by getting this bill through the Senate and onto the governor. Because we're out of, kind of city level options.
And I will say, just to emphasize on that point, again, all of your stories will make the difference. I sat for a long time in the hearing room when we had the hearing at the State House. There were senators and representatives. Many of you all were also in the room with us as well. So you remember, some of them were asking me, some of the ones not from Boston were asking me, well, why is this even a big deal? Because Boston's tax rates, Boston residents pay so much lower taxes than we do in Belmont or in some of these other towns. They're not understanding the situation of all of the pressures that our residents are facing, that it's not just our property values are going up, our incomes are not the same as some of these other towns as well, and so it's not apples to apples. And when they don't live here, it makes a difference when they hear from people who do live here.
Now, we talk about senators and let's say Boston delegation. Why can't we get them here so they can hear us?
Well, so Mass Senior Action, took today because we wanted to make sure we are armed with the information and wanted to make sure that you could speak directly with the mayor because we're in this together. And the team that has been helping to strategize, which we invite others to join with us, has planned to schedule meetings with each of the delegation and to invite the entire delegation to our November meeting. So we're not done. We're just building. And, we really thank you, Mayor Wu, for spending this time because, information and, people is power, right? And so we have the people, clearly. We got the information and we're on the move.
Mayor Wu, I am really concerned about the taxes. However, all of the taxes are being put on the homeowners who are elderly. We're talking exactly what the woman said prior to me. I can't understand, we have all these bike lanes, where you're getting all this building, who's paying those taxes? All those taxes have already been rolled over to us to begin with. And so now they're making the homeowners and the renters go up. Although they're building all these buildings, there's nowhere for the people who have been raised here, lived here all their life to live here. We can't live here anymore because we're being taxed out. The prices are ridiculous.
Yes.
What are you gonna do about it? Because I haven't seen anything on the ballots for rent control. I haven't seen anybody do anything about, I mean, American Highway, people need to start to decide, but I don't know about it. Anything that says highway has no business for a bike lane, but we're paying for that. The people who live here, we can't park on our streets or in front of our house because we have bike lanes. We're parking in the middle of the street with buses, get hit by cars and everything else. Something has to be done, and the house taxes is just ridiculous. Please do something, because this is something that has been going on for a long, long time. What are your intentions with that?
Thank you for not only being such an active leader in the community, but also making sure that we're looking at the whole picture here. So two things I want to say on that. One is, as I said before, because our taxes on the biggest source of how we fund city services is capped at 2.5%, which is more often than not less than inflation. The only way that cities have to get more revenue is to build more buildings that will then add to that number. And so it's a very skewed system that we have when we are so dependent on property taxes, because we can't get approval for things like the transfer fee that would help stabilize homeowners and seniors, or other proposals that have been put out there that would help relieve some of the pressure on city budgets. That is a push that we also need to continue to make in the years ahead, and I think once we are through this window, I would love to make sure that we're working hand in hand with Mass Senior Action to talk about how we can have that option and not have to rely on development and property taxes as the major source of funding. In this year's budget, 71% of our funding comes from property taxes. That is how much we are handcuffed to making sure that we have to keep this coming in. And it's because we don't have the ability to create other options given state law. So that is something that we definitely need to address. When it comes to bike lanes and how your tax dollars are being used, that is feedback that we very much need to hear. That is part of how the city budget process is decided each year. This year, we're actually headed into a cycle where we have participatory budgeting, so residents can submit their own ideas on what they want to see funded and take a vote on where those dollars should go. But we will be back for sure when it comes to budget season so that we can get your feedback on how to move projects. I will just say, since bike lanes come up a lot, and I hear it, and I want to emphasize, every meeting I go, people are concerned about what is this doing for safety, what is this doing for traffic, and this and that. The initial push, so I will say a lot of these projects were started many years ago, and they take time, and then they finally come out, with the construction timelines. But the city has had a commitment on the books for what's called Vision Zero, making sure that there are no fatalities when it comes to cars crashing into pedestrians, cyclists, or anyone else on the road. And so we know that the safest way on some roads is to slow traffic down. That's why we've been putting speed humps in as many places as we can and trying to listen to neighborhoods on where they want this so that the cars will go slower and people can actually walk across the residential streets again. And then in other places, we're trying to make it safe so that people don't have to take their own lives in their hands when they're driving or getting around. But happy to connect more on all of these issues and how we use our tax dollars.
Thank you, Mayor. So there is no shortage of issues for us to address in the community, and I think it's safe to say that this is the first, not the last, discussion with the mayor. And we are facing a real...
I'm saying with the commercial buildings. You said that 90-something% of the employees went back to work?
So in the largest property owner of commercial buildings in Boston said that for their buildings, which tend to be newer buildings, they tend to be the ones that have the latest amenities and most updates, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they're seeing that 95% plus of the people compared to pre-pandemic are coming back in person to work on those 3 days. And it's a little bit lower on Monday and a lot lower on Friday.
I don't think they're losing out because if people are working at home, they're using the electricity. They're not paid for their lunch break or whatever break they get from these buildings. So therefore, I think the commercial building, the government should look, get the employees back into the office. Get them back in. Why should we have to suffer because of the commercial building? Because I don't think they're losing any money. They're gaining because of the employees at home.
We're working with them on every strategy we can to make sure that they will be able to have a successful business, and a lot of that depends on our residents being successful too.
So I know that there are more questions, and I want to be clear that while the mayor is going to have to make her way, we're not done. And I'm sorry for those of you who said, but it was just my question, because I have about 6 people who said just one more. So let's be clear of where we are today. If we do nothing, those of us in this room who are homeowners in the city of Boston, I'm with you, are going to face a 28% increase in our tax bill for January 1. And at the same time, the commercial property who are making profit, from our communities are going to go down. This plan is about trying to help keep things a little bit level. If this goes into effect, if we get it through the Senate, commercial properties are still going down. Not as much, but they are still going down. This is not like who should pay the 28%, homeowners or commercial properties. No, they're not going to see a 28%. They're still going down. This is about helping to protect and to keep that down for homeowners. So I want to thank you, Mayor Wu, for being with us.
Thank you so much.
This is a really important meeting. Again, we're not done because now we got to make a plan. How we're going to be heard, how we're going to get this through. So if Edna asks everybody to kind of stay seated. Mayor, if I can trouble you to kind of stand behind my theater guests over here. I've been seeing them all because I feel like they're at a dinner theater. I've never been at one, but I've seen it on TV. Because I'd love to take a picture with everybody kind of just setting where you are, and then we're going to allow Mayor Wu to leave, and then we're going to talk business about how do we hold these senators accountable.
All those that can, you can stand for those that are able. And of course, if you have a blue shirt on, it makes it prettier. And if you have on a shirt,
All right. Let me hear it. We don't take it. We take charge. 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 Thank you.